In this tutorial, we're going to look at grids and how they can aid you in your icon design. So we'll start with a new document by using Command N to bring up the new document dialog. For the type, we're going to select Web, and as you can see, this pre-populates the dialog as we need, and just click OK, and there's our new document in the workspace. A quick way to show your grid is by using Command and the quotation marks, and that brings up an automatic grid which, when you zoom in and out, will change the subdivisions sizing so that you can work at any zoom level for your design. But for this tutorial, we're going to look at a fixed grid layout. To set up a fixed grid layout, from the View menu, select Grid and Axis Manager, and you get this small dialog here, which you can see has Show Grid checked because we've already switched it on, and Use Automatic Grid. If we deselect this option, we then get the option to set up a grid that you can see in the background here. We're going to leave the spacing at 64 pixels, but we're going to set the division to 8. Now if we select the advanced options, we can also make the grid uniform, which means the second axis will follow the same as the first axis. Now, as I'm going to be creating icons which are 64 pixels by 64 pixels, I want to separate the grid out to isolate each icon. I can do this by setting a gutter between the spacing. I'm going to set the guttering to 16 pixels. That's all the settings for this dialog, so I'm going to close that, and you can see what it looks like on the page. We have small grids of 64 pixels by 64 pixels separated by a gap. And this is where I'm going to build my icons. So if I zoom in and pan around, I can begin to design within this area here. Now when I move an object or create a new object, I currently have to use my eye to line up each section of the object with the grid. Now to aid me in creating my icons, I can instead turn on snapping. And from this drop down, you can see that there are lots of snapping options I can choose from. The most important when you're working with a grid is Snap to Grid. So I'm going to select this option and uncheck every option underneath, so that it's snapping to grid and snapping to other visible objects. So now, as you can see, it's snapping to the grid exactly how I want. And that's my first icon completed. I'm going to complete some more, and then we'll talk more about how you can modify your grid. Now here I want to draw the bottom part of the envelope, and I'll use the pen tool and set it to polygon mode to do so. Now if I drew from here, it snaps to the main division, one of the subdivisions on the grid. Now this is going to give quite a big gap between the top of the envelope and the main part, which I'll draw here. So what I can do is add more subdivisions to give me more flexibility on where I can start my shape. So if we go up to the View menu and go to Grid and Axis Manager again, I can change the divisions here from 8 to 16, and that will increase the options for my snapping. As you can see, I've left the dialog open so I can work with that and the page at the same time. Now another way that grids comes in handy is if we want to export all of our icons 64 pixels by 64 pixels. If we switch into the export persona, you can see that the grid still remains in place, and with the slice tool selected and snapping still selected, you can actually draw a slice which snaps to the size of each individual grid. And as you can see, it's reading out 64 by 64, which is exactly what we need. I can then rename these slices and export them at 1, 2 and 3 times their size. If I then click Export Selected, I can add a new folder and export them. And that's it. Thanks for watching.